It seems that a person choosing the path of a professional boxer should lead a healthy lifestyle and be highly disciplined to maintain their athletic form. However, in reality, this is not always the case. Some athletes drink between or even before fights, while others go further and in pursuit of pleasure, start using drugs. Some can stop in time and quit for the sake of their future, while others are helped by their loved ones. However, sometimes addiction takes people so far that there is no turning back. Friends, today's video is dedicated to boxers whose careers went downhill due to drugs. Please don't forget to like and leave a 4-word comment, and also subscribe so you never miss new videos. And we're starting, let's go! Number 7. Antonio Cervantes. Already in the mid-70s, Antonio Cervantes was hailed as the greatest boxer in the history of Colombia, and since then, no one has been able to take that title from him. The great warrior was born in 1945 and experienced all the horrifying consequences of war firsthand: hunger, social division, and crime. From the age of 9, he polished shoes, but when he realized that it wouldn't earn him a living, he started an underground trade in premium cigars, but quickly ended up behind bars where he met his future coach. His mentor saw excellent potential in the battered and embittered boy and got to work. In just a couple of years, Cervantes actively competed as a professional, but success didn't come to him quickly. Starting in the featherweight division, Antonio eventually reached the super lightweight division, where he became a star. He managed to win the WBA title and defended a staggering 10 times, becoming one of the most successful champions in the weight class's history. In his 11th title fight, Cervantes lost, but he reclaimed the title and continued to strengthen his legacy. A large number of fights and a memorable fighting style made him a true star, and savvy managers negotiated substantial fees for their protege, quickly making him a wealthy man. Growing up in poverty, Antonio didn't know how to save money, so he began to squander his capital on endless parties, leading to an alcohol addiction that later turned into a heroin addiction. From an athlete at the peak of his physical abilities, Cervantes quickly turned into a drug addict and, as a result, began losing. In the early 1980s, the Colombian's career finally went into decline, culminating in a defeat from the hands of Danny Sanchez. Without a means of earning a living, Antonio didn't stop spending money in vast quantities, all while still seeking new doses of heroin. In an attempt to make money, the boxer got involved in criminal activities and found himself behind bars again. And in 1988, he nearly died from an overdose. Fortunately, Cervantes was saved, and after that, he was able to return to a normal life. However, we will never know how his career would have turned out without drugs and alcohol. Number 6. Perell Whitaker. Before Floyd Mayweather's star shone in the boxing world, there was a defensive master by the name of Perell Whitaker. With his unique movements, the legendary champion in 4 weight divisions, nicknamed the Sweet Pea, mesmerized everyone from spectator to opponents. As acknowledged by elite boxers who faced Whitaker in the ring, it was impossible to hit him. The talents of this outstanding athlete were evident from the very beginning, and his main achievement in the amateur ranks was an Olympic medal, which Perell won in 1984. In the professional ring, only the judges could defeat this magician, as they occasionally delivered strange decisions not in his favor. One such robbery occurred in his showdown with Jose Luis Ramirez, was recognized as the worst in the last 10 years by a beloved magazine, The Ring. However, it's worth acknowledging that such moments didn't tarnish the career of the invincible virtuoso as much as he did himself. After several years of outstanding performances, Whitaker discovered cocaine, and that's when everything started going downhill. In 1997, Perell failed a drug test, and the result of his bout with Andrei Petryaev was cancelled. Subsequently, several of the former champion's fights were disrupted due to the positive doping tests. After that, the boxing star only had 2 fights, both of which he lost, and he announced his retirement. However, in the same year, Perell ended up in the hospital with symptoms of an overdose. Not stopping there, Sweet Pea was involved in a serious car accident that year, for which he received only a suspended sentence. However, for some reason, he brought cocaine to a court hearing and faced additional charges. In the end, the American spent 27 months behind bars, after which he was released, but he was left almost penniless, despite having earned enough for a comfortable retirement during his career. What more can be said? A brilliant creator with a unique style took the wrong path and single-handedly buried the final years of his career, tarnishing his outstanding legacy. In my opinion, it's very sad. Number 5. Pinkin Thomas. Some addicts manage to overcome their addiction and break free from their destructive habit for good. However, many people who have been through rehabilitation later admitted that obsessive thoughts repeatedly crossed their minds, compelling them to seek a new dose. This unfortunate fate befell former world champion in the heavyweight division, Pinkin Thomas. A young orphan growing up on the crime-ridden streets of Pontiac in the early 70s, he became addicted to light drugs at the age of 12 and by 14 was a full-blown addict involved in petty crimes and street fights. It got to the point that at the age of 17, Pinkin pointed a gun at his own father, threatening to shoot him if he didn't give him $100 for a new dose of drugs. Fortunately, the man managed to disarm the teenager, thus giving him a chance at a brighter future. At the same age, Thomas got married and moved to a military base with his wife, where he became interested in boxing after being beaten by a local amateur nicknamed Big Ben. Losing his sense of invincibility, the young man decided he wanted to become the best version of himself, so he gave up psychotropic substances and turned to sports, achieving significant results. Over the years in the professional ring, the naturally gifted athlete with the amusing nickname Pink managed to string together a series of 25 consecutive victories and won the WBC championship belt. Experts predicted a great future for Thomas, and the way he wielded his jab skillfully suggested that we might be witnessing the reincarnation of Larry Holmes. However, all hopes were shattered by Trevor Berbick, who handed Pinkin his first career defeat. Unfortunately, this outcome was preordained because the boxer returned to his old ways and got involved with drugs again. Close people to Pinkin's circle tried to influence him and steer him in the right direction, but his selfishness and a terrible sense of self-assuredness led to Thomas losing 6 out of 10 fights, turning him from a world champion into a stepping stone for the at the time roaring Tyson, Holyfield and Tommy Morrison. Only by significantly lowering his standards did the boxer manage to return to the winning track, but everyone had already forgotten about him and he was never considered a contender for a championship belt. Another talent lost to his own hands. Number 4. Hector Camacho. Long before legends like Felix Trinidad and Miguel Cotto rose to prominence, the title of the greatest boxer in Puerto Rican history was undisputedly held by Hector Macho Camacho, an ordinary boy from a large family that relocated to New York in the 1970s. He might have never stepped into the ring, but there was always a fire burning in his eyes. Hector knew he was born for more than a dull life. His path was far more intriguing. He took his first steps as a boxer at the age of 16, and his determination to make a name for himself far exceeded his lack of experience. Rather quickly, the unknown Camacho started gaining popularity thanks in large part to how vividly and dynamically he conducted his fights. Prolonged combinations of 5 to 6 strikes with constant level changes, swift footwork, and attacks from unusual angles adorned Hector's style, making him more famous with each new bout. Over the course of his career spanning an impressive 30 years, Macho became a champion in 3 different weight categories, and he often put together simply fantastic winning streaks. However, even for Macho, defeating elite boxers was challenging, and drugs played a role as Hector began using them in the 1980s. Like most people who rise from poverty to the upper echelons of society, Camacho succumbed to temptations and occasionally turned to psychotropic substances, getting into various troubles as a result. The most significant trouble in the boxer's life occurred in 2005 when, in a drug-induced state, he robbed an electronics store. Why he ventured there is rather difficult to explain, but the prosecutor didn't need to determine that to convince the judge to sentence the insane boxer to 7 years in prison. With the efforts of his lawyers, Macho managed to reduce the sentence to just 2 years, after which he even returned to the ring but soon ended his career. Camacho lived the life of a true gangster and never tried to play to the audience, as many of his peers did. He was passionate about sports and wanted to be a champion who delivered exciting fights, yet with his own hands, he pushed himself towards the abyss and unfortunately never fully realized his potential. Number 3. Michael Nunn. In the early 1990s, the heavyweight division continued to hold the audience's favor, but the middleweight division was quickly catching up. One of those who best captivated the audience's attention was the young and ambitious Michael Nunn. He had already made a name for himself at the amateur level, and when he turned professional, he rapidly notched up victories, along with gaining popularity. A southpaw in life, Nunn transformed into a right-hander in the ring, sensing distance perfectly and using his colossal reach to pummel opponents without getting too close. Initially, Michael was under the guidance of trainer Joe Goosen, but they couldn't work well together due to personality clashes. Soon, Nunn switched his coach and found legendary Angelo Dundee. In just 3.5 years of incredibly active performances, Michael managed to win a whopping 30 fights and in the end faced IBF champion Frank Tate, whom he knocked out in the later rounds. Within a few months, the gifted boxer was ranked among the best regardless of weight class, defended his title and continued his path to greatness. However, he stumbled against James Toney, who unexpectedly knocked Nunn out in the 11th round. As it turned out later, this defeat wasn't so unexpected. For an extended period, Michael was on drugs, specifically high-quality heroin, which he could afford with the generous fees from his bright victories. With some connections in the criminal world, the boxer could easily obtain narcotics, and from 1993 onwards, he became actively involved in their distribution. After his loss to Tony, Nunn was no longer the same, and over the next 8 years of his career, he lost 3 more times before coming under the law's radar. Legal proceedings began, revealing that the boxer had been selling psychotropic substances for many years. The court handed down its harsh verdict, 24 years in prison. Starting his prison sentence in 2004, Michael found himself a free man in 2019 when he had his sentence reduced for good behavior. The boxer changed his character and approach to life, quit drugs, and now wishes to develop as a mental mentor for young people. Unfortunately, this won't allow him to regain the years of life and the outstanding career that was so wastefully spent and could have ended very differently. Number 2. Edwin Valero. In 2010, everyone was talking about an incredible Venezuelan guy named Edwin Valero, who was thought to be capable of defeating Manny Pacquiao. So when were these conclusions made? Many people might have forgotten the name and the tragic story of Dynamite, so allow me to refresh your memory a bit. Valero grew up in an environment of cruelty and hatred among similarly disadvantaged boys. Most of the future boxer's friends died in street violence or shootouts, but he was lucky enough to escape that life through boxing. His incredible achievements at the amateur level made Valero a close acquaintance of the president, opening many doors for him, including one to professional sports. An immensely talented southpaw with an explosive personality, attacking style and knockout power, quickly became one of the most interesting prospects of the 2000s, and a fan base of tens of thousands of Venezuelan fans supported him in every performance. In just a few years as a professional, Edwin became a champion in 2 versions, and his record only grew more impressive, reaching 27 wins without a single defeat at one point. Managers and promoters were already discussing his moves to the super lightweight division and his potential showdown with Pacquiao. However, this was not meant to be, and the reason for it was Valero himself. He was never known for his mild temperament, and with the arrival of global fame, his character deteriorated further, leading him down the slippery slope of drug use. In bouts of uncontrolled aggression, Edwin could take on anyone, but his wife suffered the most. In 2009, she was admitted to the hospital with a gunshot wound to her thigh, and a year later with multiple injuries and bites. A friend in the form of the president shielded Edwin and did everything possible to keep the star afloat, but the resulting permissiveness was the cause of tragedy. In another drug-induced frenzy, Dynamite brutally murdered his wife in a hotel room and then immediately surrendered to the police. The following day, the star of Venezuelan boxing hanged himself in his own cell. Rosario, the brother of the slain wife, who would later become a top boxer too, admitted that Edwin was not a bad person. In his mind was simply destroyed by drugs. But who, one might ask, is to blame for that? Number 1. Johnny Tapia. The most famous boxer addict is how people remember the great champion with an inhuman destiny, Johnny Tapia. Unlike many of the boxers mentioned today, My Crazy Life got hooked on the needle long before he became famous, almost in his teenage years. The deepest childhood traumas, including the disappearance of his father, a car accident, the death of his mother, and underground street fights organized by his uncle, led him to addiction. All these events left hellish scars on the boxer's soul, which he unsuccessfully tried to heal with drugs while actively pursuing his boxing career. Johnny was highly successful as an amateur, but he couldn't qualify for the Olympics, so he decided to become a professional boxer. His career began in 1988 and he fought in the super flyweight division. Within 2 years, Tapia managed to win more than 20 fights, getting close to fighting for titles from major organizations. However, he tested positive for narcotics and lost his boxing license for a full 3.5 years. During this time, Tapia's life was a complete nightmare, to put it mildly. He continuously used drugs, roaming the streets, got married, and yet couldn't resist another dose of substances even at his own wedding. This led to him ending up in the hospital due to a drug overdose. Johnny's life could have ended at that moment, but his wife Teresa didn't abandon him and turned their home into a prison cell, where she kept her husband until he was completely clean. Johnny managed to silence his addiction for a while and successfully returned to the ring, where he became a champion and defended his title 13 times. In 1999, the beloved crowd pleaser lost to Paulie Ayala, marking his first career loss. Afterward, he relapsed and even attempted suicide, from which Teresa saved him. The most important fight in My Crazy Life's career came against the equally legendary Marco Antonio Barrera, who Tapia lost to in a competitive bout. This fight served as the concluding chord to Johnny's illustrious career because after it, his physical condition declined and he couldn't achieve such outstanding results. The tragic finale of Tapia's life came in 2012 when he was found dead in his own home. The medical verdict was straightforward: heart failure. And it must be said, it was to be expected. As the doctor stated, Johnny's heart was so worn and torn from drugs combined with the intense physical exertion that even a dose of caffeine could have killed him. The journey of the great boxer with a broken life had come to an end, leaving behind legendary fights that make us admire and remember the unfortunate Johnny Tapia. And that's it. Did you like the video? Then be sure to give it a like and subscribe to the channel. What do you think? Can you sympathize with boxers who lost everything due to drugs? Or are they responsible for all their misfortunes? Be sure to share your opinion in the comments.